Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so happy to have you listening today. Thank you so much for checking this out, especially if you're new. I just want to say welcome. Hey, be sure to listen to the end of every episode. That's where we have our kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, I have a question for you. Do you spend a lot of time on devices, soaking up media from iPads and phones and laptops and different types of devices that we put in front of our eyes a lot? Now, whether you're a kid or an adult, it's just part of our culture now. But we also know that we need to be careful that what we're watching and interacting with isn't junk. And so that's why I'm really excited for us to have this conversation today with my friend Duncan Reid. He works in marketing, but he says don't hold that against him. Over the last 20 years, he's worked for record companies, magazine companies, streaming services, and now at the United Kingdom-based kids content production company, Wonderborn. The Wonderborn team strives to inspire and awaken wonder across generations, and Duncan's main focus is on the new children's ministry resource, RaiseUpFaith.com. Duncan is married to Sarah and has two sons. Together as a family, they are members of Hope Community Church in Hot Wells, Bristol, United Kingdom, which is across the ocean from me. Duncan loves to surf and sing Christmas songs throughout the year. I'm really excited for you guys to learn today from my friend Duncan Reid. Duncan Reid, thank you so much for being on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Christen, I'm really, really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I just actually got to meet you. We were both at a conference in Orlando, Florida, and I got to hear your talks. I'm really excited to talk to you today. We are in different time zones, aren't we? So right now it's 9 a.m. where I am. What time is it where you are?
Well, it's actually 2 o'clock in the afternoon where I am. So I'm based in the UK, the United Kingdom, which is the other side of the pond, other side of the Atlantic. So by the wonders of modern technology, we get to talk to each other today.
That is pretty amazing that we get to talk to each other on the other side of the world. So that's a lot of fun. Well, would you just start us off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, yeah, so I'm Duncan. As I said, I live in the UK. I live in a place called Bristol, which is in the southwest of the UK. And we moved here, my wife and my kids and our family, about 16 years ago. And one of the reasons we moved here, because it means that we're closer to the beach. We love the beach and we love to go surfing. Well, I love to go surfing, and Sarah, my wife, loves to watch me surf. Maybe she loves watching me less than I love surfing. So, but that's another conversation. And I also, so surfing is one of the things that I love. Music's one of the things that I love. And I am really fortunate that I get to work for a company called Wonderborn. Now, Wonderborn is a kids TV production company. So we make kids TV that goes on national TV here in the UK, but also around the world for the BBC. But also in our company, we like to make content and TV shows that are specifically for Christian young people or people who are really interested in Jesus, to help them to understand what he's like. We like to think that we are here to inspire and awaken wonder across the generations. And we also get to make lots and lots of kind of things like curriculum and lessons to help young people in Sunday church and kids ministry to learn more about Jesus.
Oh, I love that. And that's so cool that you get to make content for regular TV and also things
Yeah.
that people can use on a Sunday morning. So that's really cool. Okay, so I want to talk about all of this. I'm really excited. But before we do that, we always like to start out with a joke because this is a podcast for kids. So this is my kids' favorite part of the show. Each time they're excited about the joke. So no pressure, but everybody's excited about this part. What do you got for us?
Well, the joke that I was going to tell you apparently wasn't going to translate very well. It was a joke about cheese and about a cheese that you knew nothing about, Christen, apparently.
So sorry.
So I hope that this will still be your kids' favourite part of the podcast. But let's have a go. So what is the bare minimum? One bear.
That is the...
It took a moment to land, didn't it?
I was like, yes, you're right. That's perfect. I love that. Good one. The bare minimum. Just one. All right. Well, let's talk about your TV stuff. First of all, I'd love to know how you got started working in the TV industry and making shows and content like that. How did that get started?
Well, actually, I didn't start out working in TV. I went to university and I did music and business studies. So I was I'm a musician by training. And when I ended up leaving university or college, I then worked in the record industry. So I worked for some quite big record labels like Sony Music and EMI and Chrysalis. And so I got really involved in music there. To be honest with you, I thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. I thought I was really, really cool because I got to work in the music industry. And then God said, well, yeah, that's great, but you really need to put your identity in me. So it's great that you do that and carry on doing that and really carry on doing that. But I want you to use that, learn how to do that, but you need to have your identity in me. So I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And so from then after that, I kind of very much thought that the job that I did was an education for something that I would do later in my life. So from working in music, I ended up working for a company that made magazines, and then I worked for a company that was a music streaming service that we started that was a bit like Spotify. And then I worked for a marketing company, and eventually I worked for a company called Integrity Music, which is actually based in Nashville, over your side of the pond.
Yeah.
And I got to work, that was the first company I'd worked for that was a Christian company, and that was great. But then I felt God called me. So the company I work for now isn't based in Nashville. It's actually based in the village that I live in, which is rather wonderful. And I just feel that, God called me here, and all of the things that I'd done in my life up until coming to here, to work in this company, were all relevant and valuable, and were a preparation for what I get to do now. So that was kind of my path to get here. Working in lots and lots of different creative industries, and I'm really, really excited that I get to do what I get to do now.
That's amazing. I hear that a lot, especially on this podcast, talking to all different types of people in ministry and people doing jobs, is that they say all these little things that they did that led up to the job they're in now really paid off or really were valuable to that. So that's encouraging to hear that, because I think sometimes we think the small thing we might be doing right now doesn't amount to much, but it really does. It really matters. And I love the quote that says, God doesn't waste anything. So he takes everything and he can use it. That's what makes him God.
And
right?
That's absolutely my experience in life. And I think that it's really good to, remember that when we're doing a job that we think, actually, this isn't exactly what I want to be doing today. I think we need to think, well, actually, how's God going to use this tomorrow?
We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app. That's right. I love that. What, tell us about the TV shows that you work on. Like, what are some of the shows? Would we be familiar with them?
So if you're in the UK, you really possibly would. So we've got a TV show called The Baby Club, which is something we make for the BBC. Basically, it's a baby club. It's parents who've got babies. It's a TV show for them to help them to understand, how to relate to their children as much as anything else. But it's also helps new families to work out how to be a family, and that's why we love making it. It's I think that kind of family values TV is as much is really close to God's heart. I mean, God puts us in family.
That's right.
We also create a few other bits and pieces for the BBC, including one show which is called Treasure Champs, which is all about different ways that different people around the world find treasure and value in stories about God. So so they're fantastic shows to get to work on. That's
so cool. And what is your role in that? What do you get to do? Are you writing it? Are you acting in the show? What are you doing?
Oh no. So I do something called marketing. So a lot of the production of those shows happens elsewhere in our company, and then I'm involved in how we then are able to build communities. Most of the work that I do is actually around the Christian content that we create. So we create stuff for Christian audiences, and we also have created this brand new kind of website called raiseupfaith.com. And that's really my focus at the moment, is about helping kids ministry leaders in churches to be able to engage and encourage and actually entertain their young, the young people that they get to work with every Sunday, with really fantastic multimedia content and curriculums and lessons and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of good stuff. Because more and more, if we want to be able to talk to all the young people in our churches, we need to really understand that the technology and the mediums that we use to tell stories are different now than they were 10 years ago, and they're certainly different than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and they're
so true.
Very different than they were 30 years ago. So we need to make sure that we understand how it is that we can communicate with young people really, really well. So that's what I get to do, and I love that.
That's amazing. And it's so true that it's so different now than what it was even 5 years ago, from what the content is that we consume on iPads and video games. There's so many different options for kids today. Let's talk about that a little bit, because that's kind of how you and I met. Is we were talking about a subject about junk media. And I love this, how you are relating the things that we watch to like junk food. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what's the difference and how are they the same?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say is, if we look at how young people, I mean, I know when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have mobile phones. I think we had videotapes. So I basically used to, record Indiana Jones films off the TV and then watch them over and over and over again. But now it's completely different. By the time the average young person is 18 these days, they will have spent 35,000 hours on screens. And by contrast, they'll have spent 9,000 hours in school, 2,500 hours talking to their parents, and 900 hours in church.
Wow.
And that's basically, that's if you were to say, to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on screens, that would be just under 4 years consistently on screens versus just over 1 month in church. So young people, for us as, parents or kids ministry leaders, if we want to carry on communicating with young people in the way that they relate to, then we've got to take that seriously. But also as young people, if we want to carry on discovering more about God's character, we need to work out, well, how can we do that in our 35,000 hours? And where are the shows that, that I find really entertaining? But I think there definitely is a similarity between the way that I think we're all really aware of what we might call junk food. There are types of food which, although they're nice every now and then, if we had them all the time, they would really be unhealthy. They would not be good for us at all.
Right.
Over the last, again, I think that's the difference over the last 30 or 40 years, is we've become more educated about what to look out for with that kind of stuff. There are different ways in which we're signposted about, what's inside the food that we're eating, so we can make healthy choices. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy to make healthy choices about the food we eat, and we can chat about that a little bit more. But I think at the same time, there is such a thing as junk media, which is the kind of media that which a little bit of it might be quite nice, but actually, if we watch too much of it, or or if there are games that we play too much, actually it has a real mental, physical and spiritual consequence. And we need to be aware of that, in order for us to make healthy choices, both as adults and young people. We need to be aware of what the media and the shows that we're getting involved in, or whatever it is that we're is taking up our screen time. We need to be aware of what it's doing to us, so that we can make healthy choices. I think before that, though, actually, Christen, if it's all right, I think that because it's really easy for us to get caught on the back foot with this conversation, because we can say, oh no, 35,000 hours versus 900 hours. What are we ever going to do? It's a nightmare. But not all content is bad.
Right.
Of course it's not. There's in fact, so much content is brilliant.
Well, I think it's something for someone that works in TV content and then a podcast to say media is bad, right? We are media, so there is some good.
It can't all be bad. In fact, here's the thing, right, Christen, is the Bible is a book, and a book is a piece of media. So actually, media can't be bad because the Bible is media. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's the stories that, that's the written down recording of the stories that have been told throughout the centuries. And we really value that. So of course, not all media is bad. I think we just need to be able to make good choices. But also, I think there's the thing that for us as parents, and I'm speaking to the parents here. So if you're a young person listening to this podcast, this bit's for your parents.
Just close your ears. La la la.
No. I think you can tell your parents to listen to this bit. But the thing is, so the pastor of the church that I'm part of, before he went to university, he got to work as a cowboy on a cattle ranch in the middle of Australia. Oh, so wow. If you imagine the middle of Australia, it's quite distinct landscape. It's red dirt, red soil, and the blue sky, and it's blazing hot. And they're in the middle of what they call the Australian outback. And when the pastor of my church arrived there, they had 5,000 cows on this farm. That's a lot of cows. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have a single fence to keep them in. Wow. And he asked straight, the question was, well, why? How do you keep your cows in the same place? How do you get them to come back all the time? And the cowboy, the main cowboy, whatever the title is of chief cowboy, he said, well, it's really easy. Actually, should I do it in an Australian accent? Oftentimes, yes, Americans can't tell the difference between Australian and English accents. So you're about to learn the difference between an Australian and English accent. So the main cowboy spoke like this, and he said, mate, it's really easy. All you need to do is put a well in the middle, because the cows will always come back to the well because they need the water. And actually, it's the same for us as people, is that we always come back. I'm speaking in my English accent now.
Yeah, that was a good Australian accent. Good job.
Thank you very much. I'm a connoisseur of good accents. I think it's the same for us as people. We always come back to the things that bring us life. And I think for us as Christians, we know that Jesus is the thing that brings us life. And that as young people, I think recognize almost more than any of us actually the good character of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And we read in Matthew, Jesus saying, let the little children come to me and don't hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. The idea was that the young people, they just wanted to be with Jesus because they recognized how good he was. And actually, it was often us adults that get in the way.
Yeah.
So, and I think that my point in saying that is that I think that we need, as parents and kids ministry leaders, we need to educate our young people about who Jesus is, and not try and build fences to, but actually just make sure that they know where the well is, and then trust them and trust God for their journey. So I just think that, the reason I say it is because I think otherwise this whole conversation can be quite a fearful one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, if you want to know the difference between junk food, how junk media and junk food are similar, I think there are 3 tests that we like to think about. The first one is the content that we're looking at, is it outward looking, encouraging and freeing? So a lot of junk food, for example, tends to be really high in sugar. That's one of the ways that we can tell if junk food is junk food, is if it's really, really high
mm-hmm.
in processed sugar, right? And actually the funny thing is that sugar, when we eat it, in our brains, we have an inbuilt reward circuit, if you like. When we get sugar, our brain goes, that's great, I've got some sugar, I'm going to reward you with a little bit of dopamine. And dopamine is like a little kind of, chemical gets released into our streams that actually makes us feel really good. That's one of the reasons when we have sugar, we feel good.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that over time, every time we have a bit of sugar, that the amount of dopamine that our body says, it's like the reward goes down every time, because our body's going, we've had that before, we know what that's like, so you don't need to have so in order to feel just as good the next time we have it, we have to have more of it. When we get into that kind of cycle, that can be what is what's known as addiction, is when we end up having things that are that are bad for us more and more, because we just feel compelled to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the opposite of freeing. So junk food isn't freeing. In fact, it kind of binds us in a way. So if we look at the way that a lot of media is created, so in the same way that there's a whole, there are loads of people working really, really, really hard and spending lots of money to try and figure out what is it that makes food as tasty as possible, or as nice as possible for people to eat, so that they will eat more of it. In the same way, there are lots and lots of people spending lots of money and lots of time trying to work out what is it that makes people want to watch more and more of our content. Because the more they watch our content, the more attention we have. The more attention we have, the more it benefits the people that are making the content. In the same way that studies show that sugar lights up this whole reward circuit, the same thing happens with content. Is that every time that with some content, so if we have this content which is very much about these very short, little, and I'm going to use a long word here for kids, you might want to ask your parents what it means. Superficial. There we go. I said it. If we have these short little, if we have these short little superficial, kind of hits of content, that's when we can really understand that it is possibly kind of junk media. If it looking, we need to look out. So the test one is the content outward looking, encouraging, freeing? The other point of that is that so much of the time, especially when we're dealing with with what's known as social media, in our everyday we tend to talk about ourselves about 40% of the time, but when we're on social media, we talk about ourselves 80% of the time. So it's not outward looking; it's very inward looking. It's very self-focused. So if what we're doing is very much self-focused, then I think we need to question, actually, is this really good for me? But if it's outward looking, encouraging and freeing, then it's there's a good chance it's really good content.
What would be something that's outward looking? Like, how would you describe that? Something that's helping people? Like, how would you describe something that's outward looking?
So outward looking, I think that it could be that. It could be something that is actually getting encouraging you to think about other people. I think that's really valuable. But also, I think it's something that's encouraging you to think about something that's not a screen. So if you're watching something which is actually talking to you about something which is, which you can't just experience on your screen. So if it's something which is talking, telling you about something amazing in the world, or is telling you about something really cool you can make. One of my boys, he really loves watching these kind of videos where they kind of take sci-fi technology and try to make it in the real world. The great thing about that content is it's really entertaining, and that's great, but it also means that it inspires him to go out and try it out for himself.
Yeah.
So that's so I think it's outward looking content is something that inspires you to do something that is not just confined to the screen that you're on. It's not just about constantly repeating the same screen activity. Mm-hmm. It's about enriching and has an outward looking. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah. So like when you're learning something, or like I love that you said when you're inspired by something, because that is amazing that we have all this content out there where we can learn about things that years ago we would have never known about, but because someone else is willing to take a video camera there and talk about it, we get to grow in our knowledge of that thing. What are some other tests we could use to learn about junk media?
The second test, is it as substance and is it nourishing? And I think this one's quite easy, is that sometimes food is superficially sweet. And you can have something that looks really nourishing, but actually then when you eat it, you realize actually there wasn't that much of it, and it kind of wasn't what it appeared to be. And I think we all know what that's like, especially sweets and that kind of thing. So when we're looking at junk food, for example, if it's kind of very much sugar coated or laden, kind of with sugar, if it's that would be something which isn't really of substance. In food, they actually spend a lot of time researching how to make it as quick as possible for you to eat it. As quick as possible to get from your mouth into your stomach, while making it look like it's something you want to eat. And so one of the ways to do that is if you pump it with a whole load of air, so it looks like it's something that's substantial, but then by the time you put it in your mouth, you realize there's not that much of it, and they actually make it so actually it takes less time to chew it. Literally takes less time to chew it. So I think that's the other thing, is that if the content that we're looking at, we're not having to really chew over in our minds, and it's not causing us to think, and we're just really, there's no substance to it, and it doesn't, and one example I have of this is, there are these things called TikTok kind of life hack videos, where you kind of have these silly little videos that are supposed to tell you here's a quick and simple way to do something. You've always done it this way, and that's really hard, but do it this way, and it's super easy and makes your life a whole lot easier. Mm-hmm. You know the kinds of videos, right? Yeah. But actually, some of those can be kind of useful, but some of them are just disappointing because they're just not true. Mm-hmm. I remember trying to make mug cakes, with my boys, because they'd seen it on a TikTok video. And we followed all the steps, but all that came out was some molten sludgy mush at the bottom of a mug that didn't taste very good at all. It was nothing like, do you know what I mean? I think we've all seen those, right? So that's the thing, is it a substance? Is it nourishing? Is it telling you something that's true? And is it, because often if it's, junk media isn't doing that, what all junk media is doing is trying to get your attention for an amount of time. Because the more time you spend looking at it, actually, the more money the people that make the content make.
Yeah. It makes me think of like when you bite something that you think is going to be really good and it doesn't taste good. And so you, instead of just putting it down and saying, I'm not going to eat that, you finish it. Like I've been trained as a good Southern girl. I'm supposed to be polite and finish it and not waste it. But same thing with, but that's not good either. That's not good for my body if I know it's not good and it doesn't taste good. Why am I trying to finish it? Same thing with junk media. If something is good and you're realizing this isn't right or this isn't true, it's okay to turn it off.
It's okay to turn it off. We don't have to finish it. You do not have to finish it if it's not good for you. And I think that's a really good point, actually, Christen, is that I know that I feel compelled. If I've started watching a video, I think, well, I better finish it, just in case. I
see it's at the end.
I think, if we can train ourselves to actually kind of make those judgments, especially when we're young. So for all you young people out there, if you can go, be able to go, actually, I don't need to watch this, and you can turn it off. Wow, that would be, that's a real
huge
talent. And that's something that, is amazing in your life. Test 3. Are we active or passive? Are we, and it's kind of linked, but are we, people, researching social media, they find that if we limit the amount of time we spend on social media, for example, to just 10 minutes a day, then actually that significantly reduces loneliness and depression in young people. Whereas if, other studies have found where young people use social media for 5 hours or more a day, that actually about 38% of those people show signs of severe depression.
Wow.
And here's the slightly scary thing, is that the average US teenager spends 5 to 7 hours a day on screens in media. And so much of that time is spent in passivity. So much of that time is spent, not actively engaging with the world we live in. Another one for the parents out there, but for the kids as well. If you go to our website, which is www.raiseupfaith.com, we've actually got a free resource there, which is called Being Not Doing, the Church, Young People and Mental Health. And it's just some really good hints and tips about how, as parents and kids ministry leaders, we can actually help our young people who are in the church to overcome depression, loneliness, anxiety, and those bits. And it helps us to be aware, which I think is the key thing.
Sure.
So I think those are the three things, is, three tests. Is it outward looking, encouraging and freeing? Is test 1. Test 2, is it of substance and nourishing? And test 3, is it active or passive? And I think if we can look at those, that can help us, as young people and adults, to be able to make really good choices about what we watch.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is good for adults as well, not just kids. I think we need to be setting an example for how our kids consume media. And so putting these tests to the things that we watch and the things we look at, I think would be really useful. Well, this has been so good, Duncan. I've really appreciated this conversation. I think it's important. And like we said before, we believe in content because that's what we're making right now. So not all media is bad, but making sure it passed that test, I think, is really good. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
I've really enjoyed talking with you, Christian. It's been great. And
Well, before I let you go, I always like to ask my guest to share a memory from when they were a kid. So do you have a memory you want to share with us today?
So I think I said earlier on, I did music when I went to college, or university as we call it here. But before, so I spent between 11 and 21 singing in church. We sung in what's known as Mass every Sunday in church. And sometimes we even sung it in Latin. Can you believe that?
Wow.
I know. So I can do all the Bible Latin. Don't worry about that. Any other Latin, can't do that. But we also used to sing in English as well. And a lot of the music that we would sing, the words were taken straight from the Bible. And for me, I went in, and I used to sing on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at least every week. We used to have music practices. So I grew up between the ages of 11 and 21 singing the Bible week in, week out.
Wow.
And that was an amazing foundation, I think, for me. So I still, throughout, when I'm in situation, whatever, if it's a situation of Thanksgiving, or if it's a situation where I'm feeling anxious or whatever it is, often Bible verses come to me in song, or in the melodies that I originally sung them. And that's really helped me in my life. So that's another reason that, media is really important, is it really helps us, and it's helped me to remember the Bible throughout my life. And I'm really thankful for that.
I love that. And I love that you were in choir. Was it all children in the choir you were in, or was it children and adults?
Yeah, so it was children and adults. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think children's choir type things today, it's more about like dance moves and
I know
rock and roll a little bit.
Well, no, so this was quite high church. So if it's kind of like so we wore what's known as cassocks and surplices. I don't know if you know what they are. With the red robes and the white sheet thing that goes over the top of that. That was us.
That's awesome.
It was amazing.
Well, thanks again for being on the show. It was nice to talk to you today.
And you too, Christen. Thank you so much for having me on, and all the best for everything you do.
Wow, such good information. I hope you're paying attention I think all the things he shared with us today are so important, especially as we are getting more and more acclimated to looking at screens all the time. It's really important to do that test and make sure that what we're watching, what we're consuming is not junk media. I love the questions he asked us with the test. He said, first, is it outward focused, encouraging, and freeing instead of being self-focused, addictive, or keeping you hooked to a screen? The other question he asked is it nourishing and have substance instead of watching something you know is not good for you or wasting time with something you don't have to think about or engage in? And the third question he asked is it active or passive? Passive is just scrolling through, looking at things for hours that don't cause us to think or interact with the world. We want to be active in what we're doing. So whether you're a kid or an adult, those are great questions to ask when you are using media. I also loved when he shared at the beginning to remember when you're doing something small or something you don't want to do, think about how God is going to use this tomorrow. I just love that encouragement. Well, now it's time for our kids only segment. This is the part of the show where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. So today I'm excited to introduce you to my friend Graham.
Hi, I'm Graham. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6:5.
Thank you, Graham. I love that verse. Deuteronomy 6:5 is such a good encouragement for us to love the Lord with our heart, with our soul, with our mind, and our strength. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you would like to be on the podcast just like Graham and share your favorite Bible verse, or maybe you want to share a joke or an encouraging quote that you like from a book or a movie, I would love to hear from you. I would love to include you on one of our podcasts. All you have to do is go to my social media and you'll find information about ways to send that to me. You can find me on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. I'd love for you to support the podcast, and there are a few ways you can do that. One, be sure to subscribe and follow this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week in whatever podcast app you're using right now. And be sure to leave a rating and a review, especially if you're on Apple Podcast. That really is a great way for people to find out about the show. You can also go to my website, thecollidekidspodcast.com, and click the link that says Buy Me a Coffee and check out all the information I have about guests and past episodes. And anytime you think about it, I would always appreciate your prayer support. I'm so glad you listened today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you back next week. In case no one has told you today, I'd love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so very much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between, and all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids Podcast.